roses are not the easiest thing to draw or paint. So, but it's definitely a beautiful thing to paint and draw. And it's a challenge, but there are lots of things to keep in mind. And the more you keep that in mind, the easier the process is going to go. So the very first thing we do when we draw something is we try to think, what shape is it? And the challenge we have with a rose is that the shape of the rose is, it's just like a never-ending change of what a rose could look like. It could look like this, it could look like this, it could look like this, it could, I mean, just depending on where it is in its stage of opening up, it's going to look very different because the petals behave differently as the rose opens up. So when the rose is all closed up, all of the petals are going inward, okay? As the rose starts opening up, the ones in the center stay curved over. And then the ones that start opening up, or of course my hand cannot do that, but they're going to start flapping outwards, okay? So that is the biggest challenge with drawing a rose, is all those changes that happen in the process of it opening and the way you're seeing it is giving it all different directions. So the number one thing to keep in mind when you're drawing a rose is be very patient, okay? It's a time-consuming subject, and it's a very delicate one, and it needs a lot of attention to detail. So I like to use roses a lot in my paintings, and when they're not the star of the show, if I'm doing, you know, a portrait piece, I do give them enough structure and detail so that they look like roses, but I'm not going through a detailed representation like we are when we're doing just drawing of a rose. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you how to start it. I'm going to show you how to break it down and what you should be looking at in the rose. So the very first thing we are looking at is what stage this rose is in. Okay, so this is kind of a rose that just started, you know, opening. It's not a complete bud and it's not a fully open rose. Okay, so if you look at the center, all the petals are upright or slightly going inwards, and as they open up, they go straight and then they flip over. So these are the few things you need to identify before you even touch your pencil or paintbrush. You have to look at the rose and you have to make those decisions. Where are the petals closed in, meaning they're curling in? Where are they going straight, and where are they curling over? Okay, so in this one we have 3 sections. In the center, they are upright. They have a slight closing into them, and then they kind of start opening up flat, and then on the outside they're curling outwards. Now the thing that is going to show this in a drawing is going to be the direction of your lines, and it's going to be the shadows that are underneath those areas that are curled over or under. Okay, so let me see if we just had anyone else join. Okay, hi Pam. Hi. Marlene and okay, and Edie. Okay, all right. So we're gonna go to the paper, and so the first thing I'm gonna show you is okay. Am I not highlight? Oh, okay. Here we are. Okay, so this is kind of one I started just to show you. Okay, no, it's this way. Okay, to kind of show you the process of starting it. If it's easy enough to determine the shape, which is more or less, you know, almost an oval. I mean, it's never gonna, the basic shape is never gonna go past being, you know, an oval or a circular shape, or even, you know, slightly squarish. It's not going to change that much. So you just want to do like an organic shape that best represents the outline of the rose. And what I did here is I kind of divided it into sections, and I started with the biggest petals that I'm seeing. And what I did is I really just went and I looked at those petals kind of individually and just trying to draw out the shape that I'm seeing via the outline. So this is in our reference, it is set against a black background, which is absolutely perfect for this because we can see the rose very clearly. We can see some, you know, very clear definition, okay? So the next thing that I did is I identified the darkest areas, okay? Which in this particular rose, a lot of them are falling underneath where those petals kind of curl over. So we have the black lines here, we have them here, in the back here where kind of the petals are going into a different direction. You have some softer ones right underneath where that petal folds over, and you have quite a few smaller ones in the bud area, okay? And then you have very few highlights in here, like really strong highlights. And I think I really like this one because it has kind of those dewdrops or raindrops on it, because they're giving a really nice highlight. And I just think it's easier to see the other shades in the rose. So we can see that there's very few areas that are purely like a highlight. You know, maybe this area over here, it would be considered somewhat of a highlight. In some points, it's getting stronger, and you have some just around the edges. But most of your highlights are falling within the petal itself when you have those dewdrops, okay? And you even have them kind of going off the petals. Another thing we're going to do today that's really going to help with the shape is we're going to use directional shading, meaning that we are going to shape our shading to go kind of seeing those slight textures that we're seeing in the rose. We're seeing some of them over here where they kind of overlap, they're giving texture, but you can clearly see that there's a rounded quality to those lines, which is again going to enhance the part of it curling over. What you need to keep in mind is when you're looking at it and you do recognize, like when you look at the rose, you can see that this petal is curled over. You want to think, well, why am I able to see that? There are little clues in there that are basically showing you that. You can clearly see it over here where you got that shadow over here. You've got another shadow. So whenever you put the shadows in, it's gonna open up and raise this area. So until you have enough shading down, it's not gonna be that easy to see that your rose is looking right. And also look at it in another way. It's kind of hard to go wrong with it. I think in most cases, what happens is the roses are underworked, and that's why a lot of people are not satisfied when they see them. You wanna go slowly. So also, overworking it too quickly is going to stop it from basically blooming and taking that shape. So work on it gradually, but make sure that you put in enough time to show all those details. So over here, I have one that I had started just to kind of show you a little bit more detail of how it would start looking. And you can see I have my almost directional shading lines starting some of the texturing. Again, remember your pencil, if you're using a graphite lead pencil, which is just a basic pencil, it's only gonna go as dark as the lead itself. It's not gonna turn into black. So you have to be careful with how you weigh out your values. Okay, and actually for the dewdrops, I use an eraser most of the time to pick them up, because you know when you're shading, sometimes you don't want to have interruptions and work around an area because you're trying to get it smooth. So you can just, you know, take your eraser and go and, you know, erase out an area that needs to have that dewdrop. Okay, so we are going to start the basic outline, and we're gonna go from there. So just be patient, and you're really going to have a lot of headway this time because we're doing a single rose. It's right there in a black and white image, which, you know, is certainly taking the pressure off the color aspect. because also that's another thing to deal with roses, is that you're hardly ever having a consistent color all the way through. They change according to what's getting sunlight, what isn't. So, you know, a white rose can have almost pinkish petals on one, in some areas they could be yellow green, and some others, even with the red, you might have hints of oranges and pinks. So we don't have to worry about anything except for the tones. Okay, so I'm going to start with the side of my pencil, and what I did beforehand is I used a knife to just get a lot of the pencil out so I can have a wide side to work with, so I can get a lot of tone rather than lines. It just helps me work faster. And the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put down the shape. So if you're looking in the black area, you can kind of just see, you don't have to do it with, you know, all the details. So we're just going to put down the shape, keep it light and loose so you can fix it if you needed to. Okay. It almost has, most of its length is here, and most of the width is kind of like here. So this probably should go down a little bit. So this is all stuff you can fix as you start working. And when you put in your first ghost drawing, which is, you know, just kind of your very first impression, make sure that you don't commit to it, because that's the very first thing you saw. And maybe as you work along, you feel that maybe this part needs to be pushed out, or something needs to be changed. So, you know, don't be married to this initial outline that you make. Just use it as, it's just a base. It's just a base to kind of get you started. Okay, so the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start separating this the best I can. We don't have to go into tiny little details. Anything that seems clear, just kind of outline it, mark it out. And I'm going to start with this very first petal over here, which almost to me looks like an ear shape. So I'm actually going to extend this line out a little bit, because I feel that it just needs a little bit more thickness to it. And if you're comfortable enough putting in some of the ridges, you can. Okay, and I'm going on the inside. And you know, also what you can do is you could section it into the shaded area and the light area. It makes it easier for you to see. And, you know, don't ever think that you have to put one single line, like I did this first line first. And I felt that it was too close. I'm just ignoring it, moving to the one to the inside. Okay, so I've got my first petal, and I'm immediately going to go to this one over here, because it kind of is connecting to this area, and it kind of goes over this one a little bit. See, I'm going past my initial line. And sometimes when I'm working and I'm on a roll, I don't want to erase, I just kind of do this to know that, okay, I need to get rid of that line. Either blend it in, erase it. Okay. Well, I think it has it's a little bit more pointy. So again, I'm going to get rid of that line. Okay, so I'm just gonna erase this here. Again, try to use a brush to get your eraser shavings so you don't accidentally rub something in that you don't want there. Okay, so I am going to put in this one over here, and I'm trying to see where it connects to the two petals that I already have. Okay, and I'm going to put in that folded part that I'm seeing, which is kind of like a highlight. I'm just going to mark it lightly. And the reason I'm doing that now is that it's clear, it's kind of talking to me, so I'm going to put it in. There's really no rules when you are first starting, you know, because certain things might hit someone's eye before somebody else. Okay, and I'm going to do that. And then I have some little curves here. Okay, next thing I'm going to do the petal that is kind of, actually, it looks like this one and the one next to it are the same petal, but they are curved. I'm not sure if they are the same one, but they look like they are connected somehow. Okay, and that shows me that this petal up here needs to be higher. I had it too close. And then we're seeing the back of the rose. Okay, so before I move too much over there, I'm going to move down here. This is kind of more of a straightforward one. And, you know, the thing to keep in mind when you're doing the roses is look out for where they are kind of folding over each other, because they will go in a row and then they will tuck under another petal, and then the other one might be overlapped. So, and they're not always consistent. Like there's no rule for it. The rose kind of opens up and just is going wherever it wants to go. Okay, then I've got the one here at the bottom. This is a very obvious shadow here, so I'm just going to mark it lightly. I just caught my eye, anything that catches your eye. Okay. And, you know, also this is a good method because when you're getting more into the bud, you're getting into more detail. If you start with that, you're putting all your energy there, and it's always best to start with the parts that are easier to see, and that way, you know, you breeze through them and then you save your energy for the parts that have more detail and require more work. Okay, so we're going to put in this petal over here. I'm trying to see where it starts. It starts almost parallel to this point where these two meet. So if I just drew a line across, I can see, and here it is. That's a little, made this a little too long. And again, you know, nobody's going to be counting your petals. So if you know, disregard one, that's totally fine. Okay, so this goes past this line. So I'm going to put it. And now we're getting into the bud in the middle. So I'm going to start with this one that kind of is containing them. Okay. Before I do that, I'm going to finish up what I have up here. And I have this one here. Okay, so you can see we already have a lot of shape. And what's going to happen next is the area where it's closed up is the area that we're going to break down. So this is going to have the most almost scattered arrangement of shadows, highlights, middle tones, etc. There's so many different ways you can go around this. People that have a keen eye for a line, you know, could go and start outlining the areas that you see. If you're more drawn to tones and shadows, then you can, you know, you can certainly do that. So I'm going to start with kind of the dark defined areas that I'm seeing, like this one in here. And I'm just going to shade it lightly. And then there's almost like a highlight. And it's very normal to kind of sometimes get lost, like, where was I, which petal? Just skip it, go somewhere else. It'll all come together. And then there's smaller separations as it starts getting towards the middle. Okay, so you can see that I have a lot of definition. So if somebody's looking at this, you know, you can clearly see that it is a rose. I'm going to darken this area over here because it is leading to it, and it will help me kind of see what I'm doing over here. I'm just doing kind of just a smooth rounded shading. Okay, so now I have everything that I need in my rows, and before I move any further, does anyone have any question about starting it, the process? You might not have everything in. I'm working fast, so I can show you as much as I can. Does anyone have any questions? Mm-mm. Just raise your hand if you do so. Justin can unmute. Or busy bees today. I don't see it. Susanna, do you want to ask something? No? Okay. All right. I guess we're good. Give everyone just a few minutes to get in the petals. I will just play with it a little bit. Okay, so we're going to go back, and so the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to put in the shadow areas. And what I want you to do while you do that is, you know, also just add a little bit more structure and shape to the different sections. And what I also want you to do is I want you to pay attention to the little curves and the little nooks, okay? Because that's going to kind of show how delicate the flower is. You know, you're not going to have very sharp, you know, lines or any straight lines. So there's some really nice little curves like this one over here. If we're doing this petal, we can see that it has just a lot of different little ridges. So I'm kind of going at the top. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to shade that in. And go lighter where you see it going lighter. It's not going to be the same thickness all the way through. I'm doing almost a circular motion. And then it kind of starts going into the shadow that is around the cup almost. And as you go up here, it's starting to kind of get bigger, thicker, and it's going to start blending in with the rest of the petal. So I'm going to take this one, has a sharp, longer edge. Now, while I'm doing this, I am kind of going into the direction of those slight lines that I'm seeing, the texture. And it's getting lighter as you're moving to the left. And of course it gets darker, deeper as you go to the right. See, by going over it again, it's smoothing it out. And then it's getting deeper and stronger as we go up over here. So again, you know, the discipline of having your hand do what your eye sees is something that will definitely come with practice. It'll start becoming, you know, second nature to you. Move in here. And just kind of fill in where you feel that the transitions are not very smooth. And I'm going to take my eraser and I'm just going to carve out where those two little dewdrops are. Oh, raindrops. So I'm just taking a little piece that I have cut out. You can even just do, you can see the dewdrop is going to have a strong highlight on the top. And where it sits, it's going to be a little bit darker. So you can see this gave it a little bit of definition. So we're going to move on with our shaded areas. So we can put in this shadow that we're seeing over here, where the petal is folding over. Now, it's not as deep as it is on the inside over here, but it's a pretty strong one. And it's kind of a shadow that is cast. So notice that it is taking the shape of the curved petal. It's not like one straight line. Okay, I'm going to work a little bit over here. So again, we're doing the darkest and deepest shadows. And you don't necessarily have to do the darkest, deepest areas first when you're drawing, but I feel in the case of the rose, because of the delicate shape and the petals curving in different directions, I think it just really helps kind of seeing what you're doing. And I think it also gives you confidence to keep going, because you're starting to see results and you're starting to see three-dimensional quality. It gets pretty sharp over here where they touch, kind of loosens out. And again, I'm using kind of directional shading. And you can see it's almost kind of changing direction as you go down. And then these lines kind of, they go from here, going into this curve. And then it's almost like they're wrapping around. And that is really going to help show and enhance that petal is folding out. Okay. And I did my lines a little bit more pronounced so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. I'm going to soften this a little bit. And be careful with the areas that you leave white, unless you do want them to be white, because that's what you're seeing. But otherwise, make sure that you give it, because it can really throw an area off if it's left white and it's not intended to be white. And you can see that there's no sharp edge over here because the fold is gradual. The fold over is gradual. So it's kind of almost trailing out from that area. And carrying over on the rest of the petal. Again, here you can see some texture. You can see the direction of the lines. I mean, sometimes it's really the little things that help. So if you did these lines kind of, you know, up and down like this, it's really working against the grain of that rose and against the lines that are forming that texture. And since I'm here, I'm just gonna just give it a little bit more shape. Again, those are like the fun little nooks that just show how delicate each petal is. Okay. So I am going to continue with my dark areas. So this over here, this petal generally is dark. It's almost as dark as this one. And except instead of having the darkness on the right, the darkness kind of goes like slightly under it. So I'm just going to start with a light coat, again, trying to be directional with my shading. Kind of see these lines going this way. Okay, I'm going to start going darker in here. Just have a light that, oops. And there's many different ways you can smooth out your shading. You know, like I said last time, you could use your finger. You could use something called a paper stump, which I should have one around. Not sure where it is. But if you've seen one, you know, it looks kind of like a pencil, but it's made out of paper, so it will just smooth. But you can use your finger to get some smoothness if you want. Just, you know, you don't want to do it everywhere because then you might lose a lot of detail. Even, you know, even a tissue. And there's a big droplet over here, so I'm kind of going to leave space for it. I'm going to work a little bit on some of those middle tones. And there's a big droplet over here. Okay, I think this area needed to be darker. Okay. And I'm going to take my eraser and I am going to carve out that droplet. Okay, then again down here you can see the directional lines. And what you can do when you're doing this, now we're moving to this part of the petal, you can see it's a little bit darker, you know, just kind of just make the shading closer together and you will get more of a darker shade. And again, while you're doing that, make sure that you shape I'm just going to give it this nice little flick of a point that it has. And then you kind of start seeing those lines going around. So just always, when you're shading, just think of the shape. You know that it's curling over. So let's say if this were striped, what direction would the stripes be going? Kind of think of it that way. See, so when you do it in a specific direction, it's going to enhance the shape a lot more. Okay, so we're going to go to this petal over here. Okay, I think this line is not where I wanted it to be. Okay. I think this petal in general just needs a little bit nicer shaping. And you can really see the little curves, little dents. And if when you're doing this, if you're able to see a petal in isolation, like see the shape of it, you know, you can outline it and work within that outlined area. If as you're working, that outline seems to be too strong, you can always erase it or blend it in. But, you know, sometimes you just have to do whatever makes it easier for you to see a certain area. Again, it's starting a little heavier in the middle. In the, sorry, the right side of it. And there's a little dark area in here. This one has a lot of fun little droplets on it. Okay, so I'm going to carve out those little drops. And I do not recommend that you use white pencil, even if you're doing this in colored pencil, because it's going to mix in with the color that's underneath and it's not going to give you that crisp white that you might want. If you want an area to be really white, you can, you know, just work at it a little bit more, or you could have, you know, if you're that disciplined, you can leave it white while you're working, but also, you know, running a sharper shade under it will make it look lighter. See, like that. I'm not going to do all of them. Continuing to work. So really, no matter where we end today, you're basically doing the same thing. So there is no trick when doing the rows that one area is going to be harder than the other. It's almost like each area really deserves attention, and it really it just needs to get its specific shading and tonal value that it has. So it's not like, especially when you're just drawing the rose itself, you don't have the stem or the leaves. So there's no peak area that's harder, like doing the eyes on a person or doing reflection in water. It's all really equal amount of work. Let me see how much time we have. Okay. So we'll work a little bit more. Okay. And ideally, I would be kind of arranging the tones in almost a circular manner, going over all the areas, but I'm just trying to show you how detail is going to start looking. So, and just be mindful when you're shading a new petal. Just look at it. Like I'm looking over here. This one is definitely lighter than this one. So I need to make sure that my hand stays light on this particular one. And this one you can almost see like a bumpy texture on it. And to do the bumpy texture, you're just going to go darker in some areas and just kind of breeze over some of the other areas. And there's almost the highlights at the top here. Okay, I think it just needs to be a little bit lighter, so I'm just gonna skim my eraser, just pick up some of the color. Probably a little bit more up here. And sometimes if you're working on something and you just really went too dark, I would erase it and just kind of start the shading over. I'm just going to go in and darken this a little bit. Yeah, that looks better. Once I darken this area, it's making more sense for this leaf to look, petal to look a little bit lighter. And there's a really cool shadow over here that's cast on the petal. And again, it's following the outline of this petal. So I'm just gonna give it a little bit more shape. So the shadow is always gonna be, a softer edge than whatever is casting the shadow. Okay. Let me do This one over here, also this one, you can see the direction. You can see just the curving these lines as you shade is helping to show that the petal is turning over. Okay. And here we have the other side of another of this petal. So we're seeing the inside, which is light. And you know, again, you don't have to draw this with all the detail. I mean, sometimes just showing one part, you know, and just emphasizing that will do the job. I'm just going to fill in the rest of the areas so we're able to compare. And there's some pretty big droplets over here. Just going to put in some of the other petals. And see the details of, you know, of the smaller areas become a lot easier when you have so much to compare it to, because they're falling into context when you do that. But if you're just working on this area, imagine if, you know, you're kind of just isolated working on this area, it might not look like anything for a while. But when you have it against the other petals that are established, you know, to a certain degree, it's going to be a lot easier for this to make sense. Okay, so all right, we have 5 minutes left. Justin, if you can unmute everyone. Let's see. Here, I'll just bring this up just a little bit closer. You can look at some of the details. So are we more comfortable with roses? Yes, no, maybe?
Maybe.
Just, or do they need to unmute themselves or do you unmute them?
I just unmuted myself.
Okay, can you unmute yourselves if you can?
Yeah.
I'm asking them to unmute because I don't have the ability to.
Okay, yeah.
It's second grade. No, I don't remember much about elementary school. I remember second grade.
Okay, so what do we think?
You gave us you always give us great pointers on how to start from nothing and build on it. And I've always liked your classes because it's so different from any others that I've ever done.
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you, Pam. I know you do a lot of classes, so
you
that's
know,
very nice to
I've
hear
done
that.
with grit. You have really taught such a difference in your technique, and you're such a good teacher that I really enjoy.
Are you going to tell about the
Fortunately,
emails?
I missed some of them.
Thank you. Justin, make sure you tell Steve that.
Oh, he
Better than any classes that they've taken. You hear that?
Ooh.
is really, really, really talented and a great teacher.
Oh, thank you, Pam. That means a lot coming from you, especially. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. I mean,
I mean, first of all, I have to be honest. I love doing this class. I love dealing with these beautiful, experienced minds. It's a thrill. Honestly, it's a thrill. It is my favorite teaching experience ever, and I've taught for a very, very long time.
right.
So, but you know, I really think that you know, a lot of it comes from my personal experience when painting things, and you know, sometimes you think you can do something until you get better at other things and you realize, yeah, maybe, you know, my portraits need work or my roses need work, and it's just a lot of practice. It's what's going to do it. So Carol, how did it turn out?
Oh, it kind of looks like a rose.
Okay, that's progress. Karen, what do you think? Is that
It's
your first
light,
time
though.
doing roses?
I mean, I don't know if you can see.
Uh-huh. Yeah, looks good. Yeah.
You know, it's just the way you start and helps define, because your eyes just cross over when you're trying to draw pictures. And I think it really
Thank you so much.
great technique. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
just, this is
Sharon,
what,
what do you think?
this
Little
is what
fuzzy.
I got so far.
Looks really good. Looks really good.
And this is what I sketched out.
What's up?
I did it at the wrong direction, but
Yeah,
this
it
is
automatically comes.
sketched out before class started. And I
Okay.
decided to just go with yours because I noticed a little thing, but it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
I
No, I think that's great. That's been one of our it's everybody's challenge. Roses are, and even for me, I mean, there's times where I do them better than others, and I've noticed if I'm painting them and I'm slightly distracted, like I don't get the best results, because you just have to be careful with them. You have to be mindful. That's why roses are so special. You know, you need to give them that kind of attention that they deserve. Let me see who else. Susanna? Very nice. Good. Yes. Wonderful. You can't hate them now. That looks great. Lucia? Lucia, can I see?
Oh, that's
Shining a little bit. Okay. Beautiful. Very nice.
I'll show you mine.
Phyllis?
Just a second, let me go back to
Okay.
one. If you could see it.
Wow. Very nice. Really nice. Carol, can you show it to me again, please? Or did you? Beautiful. Very nice. Marlene, how did you do? Can you unmute yourself? Just the red button.
okay. How's that?
Okay, perfect. Yes. Looks good. It's a challenge.
It
Yes.
is a challenge.
But that's good. You know, honestly, what I think, if you, this would be the video to maybe watch again once Justin is able to put it up. This would be the one to watch again. And also, if you get a chance, look up some YouTube videos. I mean, there's a million of how to draw a rose. I mean, some of them are bad, but some of them are not great, but you can get something. To me, it's just looking at the perspective. If you get one thing out of someone's video that can help you, and it will always add to the reservoir that you're already getting with roses. So are we going to be open to watercoloring them soon, you think? Not next time, I promise, not next time, but we will. No. They will. Just practice them. And if you find any more black and white rose pictures, there's plenty on Pinterest. I would just do some just for practice, just to kind of and there's always going to be, once you start doing more roses, there's always going to be your go-to rose in a certain direction and opening stage that you will always do. And it kind of becomes like your signature rose. So make sure you do that. Next week, we're going to do watercolor. So again, we're doing watercolor 2 weeks and then drawing 2 weeks. So they're going to be two in a row, just to give us a little bit more chance of polishing the skills. And if does anyone have any questions or?
Nice mine.
Oh, Andre, because I cannot see you. Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
No, I don't know if it. Oh, hold on.
Yeah,
I don't know how to. I'm very bad at this, but
we're
Can
all
you-
learning. Don't worry. We're all learning. Trust me.
I don't know if you can see that. I don't know.
No, we can't see you. Your camera is off for some reason, but you can
Oh.
email it to me. And I'm sorry, I know you sent me one, I think this morning, and
There
I
you
have
go.
not gotten back to you.
Well, it's okay. It was. I had okay. I think now I can.
Yeah.
Then. Anyway, okay. I'll
Okay.
send it. Thank
All
you. Thank you for
Okay,
the
now we
lesson.
see you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Enjoy this gorgeous weather.